Hello and welcome to this special broadcast on WION. I am Mohammed Saleh.
And I'm Ananya Dutta. The year 2023 will be remembered as the year of two wars.
The two wars that are redefining the security apparatus of two flashpoint regions on two different continents.
The Russia-Ukraine war, that is now in its 23rd month, has witnessed one of the biggest military mobilizations that we have seen since the end of Second World War. Ukraine's much-touted counteroffensive, which promised much, has delivered little.
And not even the most ardent backers of Ukraine now believe that Kiev will be able to roll back the Russian war machine. Now, the scale of what is happening on the battlefields of Ukraine can only be understood by the numbers.
The United States has pumped in over $113 billion of military and financial aid to Ukraine, while the European Union has added an impressive $91 billion of military and financial assistance so far. There is little official data on how much the Kremlin is shelling out for its Ukrainian campaign. Forbes has pegged the total war expenditure by Russia at a staggering $167 billion since the beginning of the invasion.
So what impact has this kind of money made on the battlefield? Now, this is the map of Ukraine on the 1st of January 2023. And this is the map of Ukraine in December 2023. Believe it, less than 500 square miles of the territory has in fact exchanged hands. The biggest territorial gain is that of Bakhmut, which Russia captured in May 2023. On the 26th of December, in an audacious attack, Ukraine struck a Russian landing ship, Novoscherkassk, at the Crimean port of Feodosia.
But Kiev's Western allies are less than enthused by these rare tactical successes. In fact, President Volodymyr Zelensky spent a large part of the last quarter of 2023 lobbying in Western capitals for more funds, only to find his Western backers hemming and hawing without opening their purse strings.
Now, from the outset of the Ukraine war, this war was all about determining the eastern frontiers of the NATO military alliance. But the year 2023 has highlighted another glaring reality that has set alarm bells ringing in European capitals. Now, Ukraine's counteroffensive was fought with the best Western weapons, and yet the Russian forces have managed to blunt Kiev's Western-backed onslaught.
What this means is that even if Russia attacks another NATO nation, then the NATO forces would be fighting with the same weapons that have proven ineffective in the hands of the Ukrainians against the Russians. So how real is the possibility that Russia could attack a NATO nation in the near future? Saleh?
So that, of course, is a big question, Ananya, because a lot of people are saying that, look, there is an ironclad guarantee and therefore Russia would not attack a NATO nation. But this is where it gets interesting. If one goes by the Berlin-based think tank, the German Council on Foreign Relations, who have based their analysis on information from German intelligence and defense services, then Europe's NATO member states may have just about 5 to 9 years to be war ready. But Poland's head of National Security Bureau, Jacek Siwera, has in fact warned that Russia could actually attack a NATO nation in less than 36 months.
What is compounding fears in the European capitals is the very real possibility that Donald J. Trump could return to the White House in the big American elections in 2024. And Trump would be an unreliable ally in Washington to guarantee European security. These fears are still in the realm of speculation, but they have already created real-world consequences.
And one of the first consequences that you'll notice, Ananya, is this. You know, the German defense minister just this month was actually in the Lithuanian capital, Vilnius, on the 18th of December. And he's now pledged to station as many as about 4,800 German troops in the Baltic states. What this means is that he's putting German troops in the direct line of fire in case of a Russian assault on the Baltics. Now, Poland is also signing a string of arms deals to beef up its defense capabilities and has ramped up its defense budget to 4% of the GDP.
Saleh, it seems to be clear the Ukraine war has changed the security calculus of Europe, and 2024 is unlikely to improve those things. In the last week of 2023, the United States has released the last tranche of US military aid to Ukraine. That is $250 million. The Ukrainian lifeline of American weapons and ammunition is now in real danger of collapsing. There is clear war fatigue in the West, and these developments beg an obvious question. Has Russia outlasted Ukraine in this crippling war of attrition? And does this mean that the United States, even though it is making all the right noises, is letting Ukraine sink, making it inevitable for Ukraine to negotiate on Russian terms?
A single day of fighting against the Russian war machine costs Ukraine a staggering $136 million. You must hear that number again, $136 million, just for the Ukrainian soldiers to have enough ammunition and logistical support to step up and brace the Russian onslaught. And this number is according to Ukraine's finance minister, Serhiy Marchenko. At the moment, Ukraine spends all of its revenue on its defense sector to meet the needs of its army, while its other budgetary needs to run the government have so far been largely covered by Western aid. Since the beginning of this war in February 2022, Ukraine has received a total of $68.5 billion as budgetary support from its allies in the West. But the coming financial year, that is 2024, is going to be a very difficult one. Ukraine will need billions of dollars of financial support just to disburse its social payments, wages for its government staff, and pensions for millions of Ukrainians. And according to the Ukrainian Finance Ministry, this expenditure alone will create a budget deficit of $43 billion in 2024, which Kiev hopes to cover up using the financial aid from its Western partners. And this is where Ukraine's wartime budget appears to have hit an insurmountable roadblock. The American President Joe Biden is making all the right noises.
Congress needs to pass supplemental funding for Ukraine before they break for the holiday resources. Simple as that. Frankly, I think it's stunning that we've gotten to this point in the first place. While Republicans in Congress are willing to give Putin the greatest gift he could hope for and abandon our global leadership, not just in Ukraine, but beyond that. We've all seen the brutality that Putin has inflicted on Ukraine, invading another country, trying to subjugate his neighbors to his iron rule, committing atrocities against Ukrainian civilians, trying to plunge them into the cold and darkness of winter by bombing their electrical grid so they don't have any heat during the winter, or electricity for that matter.
But many analysts around the world aren't convinced that Joe Biden is putting the money where his mouth is.
Mr. Biden is complicit in the defunding of Ukraine. And as he says, they want to pin the blame on the Republicans. But the fact is that he had every possibility of getting the money that he wants from the Senate if he had agreed to the demand of the Republicans that more money also be put up for the border security. He didn't do that. And he knew that the Republicans would then reject the bill. So he is finding a way to let Ukraine sink and then to blame the Republicans.
On the front lines, Ukraine is looking increasingly underprepared and short-equipped to deal with Russia's winter offensive. The Russian Defense Ministry has put out this video, claiming that the Russian forces had destroyed Ukrainian armored vehicles, the US-made 777 howitzers, and the M109 self-propelled howitzers. Pitched battles are being fought on the front lines in places like Kupiansk, Krasny Lyman, Donetsk, and the left bank of the Dnipro River. Russia also claims to have shot down 2 Ukrainian MiG-29 fighters, 1 Mi-8 helicopter, and has even reportedly intercepted an anti-radiation missile. While Ukraine claims to have destroyed multiple Russian artillery and electronic warfare systems. The former coal hub city of Avdiivka, which had a pre-wartime population of 30,000 people, has been almost completely depopulated, as the Russians claim to have completely surrounded the city. Within the European Union, there are grumblings over the concessions that are being given to the Ukrainians. Truckers in Slovakia have now joined the protests along with the Polish in blocking off the main border crossing points with Ukraine. These truck drivers are demanding that the European Union must reintroduce a permit system for their Ukrainian competitors. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky visited the wounded soldiers on the occasion of the National Army Day. He distributed medals and also tried to pull up the flagging morale of his soldiers. In a video message to his countrymen, he has promised victory at all costs.
It was difficult, but we have persevered. It is not easy now, but we are moving. No matter how difficult it is, we will get there. To our borders, to our people, to our peace, fair peace, free peace, against all odds. The wall of remembrance, the wall of memory to our heroes. I'm sure for every one of us, it will be a reminder and will serve as a wall for our will. A wall that won't be broken and overcome by fear, mistrust, despair, discord, and thoughts of giving up.
But wars aren't fought on willpower alone. Military campaigns are sustained by weapons and logistics. American military aid for Ukraine at this moment hangs by a thread. The minute it becomes clear that Kiev no longer has the American greenback to stand upon, a Russian victory in this war becomes a mere formality. A military contest is often a contest of organization and technological superiority. Now, for decades since the end of the Cold War, and perhaps even during the Cold War, the United States and its Western allies had taken pride in claiming that Western weapons had the edge over the Soviet and Russian military hardware. But the Ukrainian war has thrown up some very interesting outcomes in scenarios where the US weapons have been in direct contest with their Russian analogues. In 2018, Vladimir Putin had boasted to the world about an array of super weapons that Russia had developed. And in the Ukrainian battlefield, some of these Russian strategic weapons were deployed in active combat. So how effective are these next generation of Russian weapons?
From the time Russia began its invasion of Ukraine, Moscow has showcased one new strategic weapons system after another. Dubbed as Russia's new super weapons, Vladimir Putin announced the development of these weapon systems during his presidential address back in March 2018. And now Vladimir Putin claims to have pulled out yet another card from his sleeve.
Now we have practically finished work on the modern strategic weapons that I spoke about and announced a few years ago. We have conducted the last successful test of the Bur-Vestnik, a global range cruise missile with a nuclear installation and a nuclear propulsion system.
What Vladimir Putin is talking about isn't just a cruise missile that can carry a nuclear warhead, but rather a cruise missile that uses atomic energy for its propulsion, and that can also deliver a nuclear payload. This video, released by the Russian Defense Ministry from the testing site of this new weapon system, will give you a glimpse of what this new missile is capable of. The Russians call it Bur-Vestnik, while the West and NATO powers have dubbed this new weapon system as Skyfall. As Bur-Vestnik relies on nuclear power for its propulsion, it technically has an unlimited range, making it possible to be launched from any part of the globe, maneuver it safely through anti-air defense systems before it strikes its target with pinpoint accuracy. If Russian claims are true, then this missile provides Moscow with a technological edge that no other country has. At the beginning of 2023, Moscow sent ripples through the military establishment of the European capitals when it tested its Poseidon nuclear torpedo in the Arctic waters. Nicknamed the post-doomsday weapon, this maneuverable torpedo can create nuclear tsunamis and can potentially wipe out entire cities along the coastline. But the Russian strategic weapon that has been used extensively in the Ukraine war is the Kinzhal hypersonic missile. The Kinzhal means a dagger. And true to its name, this new hypersonic missile has wreaked havoc through the Ukrainian skies. On the 16th of May, the Ukrainians admitted that one of the Patriot defense missile systems given by the Americans had been damaged by a Kinzhal strike. Another strategic weapon system that the Russians have deployed during this war are the scramjet-powered Zircon hypersonic anti-ship missiles that have now been fitted on Admiral Gorshkov, which is one of Russia's most advanced warships. On the 20th of April in 2022, Russia test-fired a hypersonic missile called Satan II with an estimated range of 18,000 kilometers. It can fly at a speed of 6 times the speed of sound, and if fired by Russia, it has the potential to devastate any European capital in a span of less than 200 seconds. And what's more, the Satan II, according to Russian claims, can be maneuvered in mid-flight, making it that much harder to detect and intercept. On the 2nd of September 2023, this Russian nuclear missile that can deliver a 10-ton nuclear payload to any part of the globe was deployed for combat. What have also been deployed and are combat-ready are the avant-garde hypersonic glide vehicles that can deliver both nuclear and conventional payloads. Military analysts point out that these weapon systems are an overkill. Only the Kinzhal hypersonic missile has been deployed in combat against Ukraine, while 3 other weapon systems are said to be combat-ready. The Burevestnik and Poseidon are in the later stages of testing. Vladimir Putin has in recent years boasted that these weapon systems will make Russia's enemy think twice before engaging in combat with Russia. And if hostilities between Russia and NATO continue to fester, then the Western nations will have to come up with weapon systems that can take on the firepower of Russia's new strategic weapons.
Now, for those of us who are sitting at home and watching reports of horrific violence that's been unleashed on the battlefield, it's pretty hard to comprehend the actual nature of war. Common, innocent people who are unfortunate to be caught in a war zone have their lives crushed at a moment's notice. But then, there are those for whom war is a business. And my colleague Ananya Dutta will tell you more about these very cynical aspects of war that are seldom highlighted upon.
Absolutely, Saleh. War is not the same for everyone, is it? For weapons manufacturers and defense contractors, war is a time to make profit. While common people are horrified at the terrible violence unleashed in a war, weapons manufacturers rub their fingers in glee as tensions escalate and the first bullets are fired. As the rest of the world has been paralyzed by the cost of living crisis in 2023, for the defense manufacturing companies, business has never been this good, as thousands have been killed in 2023 in the battlefields of Ukraine and the Gaza war. For the merchants of death, that is the defense companies and contractors, the war has come as a godsend, an opportunity of a lifetime to mint the next billion as the common people bury their dead in the battlefields. Defense manufacturing is a $2 trillion industry. The shares of defense manufacturers and contractors are traded in the top stock exchanges of the entire world. People who invest in these companies are hungry for profits. And need we say that the Ukraine war and the war in Gaza have helped them earn some very handsome profits in the year of 2023. Now, this is how the stocks of some of the top defense manufacturers from the United States have performed since the 7th of October. The share prices of Lockheed Martin, the company that manufactures the F-35 fighter jets, the Javelin anti-tank missiles, and the Black Hawk helicopters. The share prices since the beginning of this war have shot up by a whopping 12.7%. The red dot you see is October 5th. Just 2 days later, October 7th is when the war broke out. Between that, you can see the steep rise in the share price. For Raytheon, which manufactures the Patriot anti-air defense missiles and spy radars used by US destroyers, the share prices have jumped by 21.31%. While in the case of General Dynamics Corporation, that manufactures the M1 Abraham tanks and Virginia-class nuclear submarines, the stock prices jumped by over 25.6%. And while for the British Base Systems, the largest defense contractor in Europe, the share prices have shot up by a margin of 11.5%. As it's clear, it's a pattern that repeats in country after country for the defense corporations. There must be something soulless in counting profits that are made from the dead. So think about this. While thousands have died in wars and conflicts around the world in the year of 2023, there are also thousands of others who have quietly minted a fortune by manufacturing those weapons. And in our next report, we will tell you how the order books of the defense companies have grown in 2023.
The two wars have sparked a greater sense of global insecurity. Military expenditure in Europe has witnessed its sharpest spike in over 30 years. As one European nation after another has announced new orders for ammunition and weapons hardware, global military expenditure has risen by 3.7% to a staggering $2.24 trillion. The order books of the world's biggest defense manufacturers are at a record high. The combined order books of the top 15 global weapons hardware manufacturers at the end of 2023 stood at $777 billion. All through 2023, there had been an acute shortage of 155mm artillery shells, which forced the United States to source these artillery shells from South Korea and Pakistan, while Russia sourced arms from North Korea. American and European defense companies at this moment are struggling to increase their production capacities. And as long as the wars continue, the order books of the defense companies will remain in backlog. Profits will be made, weapons churned out, and innocent civilians will pay the ultimate price.
Now, the Ukraine war has continued all through 2023, taking a heavy toll on human life.
But on the 7th of October, an equally intense another conflagration erupted in a familiar conflict zone, West Asia, when Hamas launched a surprise terrorist assault.
Now, in the early hours of the 7th of October, Hamas dubbed it as Operation Al-Aqsa Storm. The Palestinian militant faction attacked Israel from land, air and sea. In a span of 20 minutes, Hamas claims to have fired over 5,000 rockets into Israel, and its fighters breached and captured an Israeli military camp.
As sirens blade over the Israeli skies, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu appeared on national television to announce that Israel was at war with Hamas. The 7th October toll was heavy. Almost 1,200 Israelis had been killed in the Hamas incursion, and over 240 Israelis, including a few from the Supernova Music Festival, had been taken captive.
So as Israel prepared its counteroffensive, the big question in Israeli minds was fundamental to its sense of security. How had the Israeli agencies failed to predict and prevent this massive attack from the Gaza Strip? Because effectively, Israel has placed the Gaza Strip under a blockade for more than a decade.
And everything that is brought in and taken out from the Gaza Strip passes from under the watchful Israeli eye. Our next report getting you more details.
This is the moment when the attack by Hamas began on Israel. Wave after wave of Hamas rockets pierced through the Israeli skies and wreaked havoc in different parts of Israel. As sirens blared in city after Israeli city, the scale of the attack by Hamas became clear. But what became clear as daylight was the fact that Israel had been caught off guard. Soon, chilling images of the Hamas fighters breaching through an Israeli military camp and capturing it started to do the rounds. This video shows the Hamas fighters pulling an Israeli soldier out of a destroyed tank near Israel's border with Gaza. And according to Hamas, they've managed to capture several other Israeli soldiers and are presently holding them captive. And this video will give you a glimpse of the tactics employed by Hamas this time round. Captured by a drone, it shows ammunition being dropped on Israeli soldiers. The military commander of Hamas, Mohammed Saleh, has claimed that the assault was precipitated by the violence and the atrocities committed by the Israelis on Palestinians for decades.
We have decided to put an end to this with God's help, so the enemy understands that the time of wreaking without being held accountable is over. We announced the start of Al-Aqsa flood operation. We also announced with the help and strength of God that the first strike of Al-Aqsa flood operation has targeted sites of the enemy, its airports and military fortifications during the first 20 minutes, with more than 5,000 rockets and missiles launched. This day is the Great Revolution Day, to put an end to the last occupation and last apartheid regime in the world.
Images of the devastation wreaked by the Palestinian rockets have taken everyone by surprise. The failure of the much-touted Israeli Iron Dome in stopping the Hamas rockets and the failure of the Israeli intelligence agencies in predicting and preventing these attacks has raised a lot of questions. Soon the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu put out a statement saying that Israel is at war with Hamas.
Citizens of Israel, we are at war, not in an operation or in fighting grounds, but at war. This morning, Hamas launched a murderous surprise attack against the state of Israel and its citizens. We have been in this since the early morning hours. I convened the heads of the security establishment and ordered, first of all, to clear out the communities that have been infiltrated by terrorists. This currently is being carried out. At the same time, I have ordered an extensive mobilization of reserves and that we return fire of a magnitude that the enemy has not known.
But the Israeli people hardly needed a reminder that they were living through a war, because the war was all around them. On the other hand, the Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas has said that the people of Palestine have a right to defend themselves, and that the attack by Hamas was in response to the atrocities committed by the illegal Israeli settlers on Palestinian lands. The surprise assault by Hamas was unprecedented. Captured Israeli military hardware was paraded on Gaza's streets, and barbed wire barricades erected by the Israelis were brought down. Israel's response to the assault by Hamas began a few hours after the Hamas attack. Israeli fighter jets were spotted over the Palestinian skies as Tel Aviv unleashed an air and ground offensive unlike anything that has been witnessed in decades.
For more than 2.5 months now, Tel Aviv has pounded the tiny fenced-off Gaza Strip with thousands of airstrikes, leveling entire city blocks. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has likened Hamas to the Islamic State group and vowed to quote-unquote crush and destroy it.
Now, the Israeli campaign of relentless air bombings and also ground assaults, in addition to the siege of the coastal enclave, has elicited accusations of collective punishment of the Palestinian people in the Gaza Strip. Repeated calls for a humanitarian ceasefire, international outreach and even potential risk to the hostages who are at this moment held in the Gaza Strip has failed to stop the relentless Israeli war machine.
The question now on everyone's mind is this: what is Israel's endgame in Gaza? Our next report answers.
Allahu Akbar!
The unprecedented Hamas attack has shattered the Israeli sense of security and has shaken the trust a common Israeli had in the Israeli government's security apparatus. And Netanyahu's political career now hinges on what happens in the Gaza war.
We are fighting a cruel enemy, an enemy that is worse than Daesh. We have seen little children tied up and shot in the head, people burned alive. young girls raped and massacred, fighters beheaded. In one place they gathered people together, bought tires and petrol and burned them alive. What horror, what suffering. We are fighting with all our might, on all our fronts. We have gone on the offensive. Any member of Hamas is a dead man. Hamas is Daesh. We will crush them and destroy them, as the world has destroyed Daesh.
11 weeks into the Israel-Gaza war, the long list of statistics narrate a staggering human toll. According to Gaza's Hamas-run health ministry, more than 21,000 Palestinians have been killed. 70% of them are said to be women and children. In addition to this, over 54,036 Palestinians have been grievously wounded or maimed in the Israeli offensives since October 7th. The total number of Palestinians killed in Gaza so far amounts to nearly 1% of the Palestinian enclave's pre-war population. Homes and livelihoods have been destroyed. The indiscriminate, relentless pounding has resulted in the displacement of 1.9 million Palestinians, which is nearly 85% of Gaza's 2.3 million people. According to the United Nations, 500,000 Palestinians in Gaza at this moment are starving. Another report by Integrated Food Security Phase Classification mentions that 26% of Palestinians in Gaza have exhausted their food supplies and coping capacities and face catastrophic hunger and starvation. More than 313,000 residential units have been either completely destroyed or partially damaged in Gaza by the Israeli bombings. Even places of worship have not been spared. At least 203 have been damaged in the Israeli strikes. Gaza's health sector has been pushed to the brink. With just 9 of its 36 hospitals still functional, all of them are located in the south. As many as 101 journalists have been killed in the line of duty while reporting about the Gaza war. Over 7,000 Palestinians in Gaza are missing, presumably under the rubble, and are feared dead. The United States, Israel's biggest ally, has sent munitions worth over $14.3 billion to Israel, without any conditions on the way Israel can use the weapons provided to it. According to reports in the American media, nearly half of all munitions dropped by Israel on Gaza are imprecise, dumb bombs. The United States has also deployed 2 of its largest and most advanced aircraft carriers, the USS Gerald R. Ford and the USS Dwight Eisenhower, to deter any state or non-state actor from seeking to escalate the war. The Israeli ground and air offensive is already being described as one of the most devastating military offensives in the many decades since the Second World War.
Collective punishment is a war crime. Israel's collective punishment of the entire population of Gaza must immediately cease. Collective punishment is occurring through the choking off of water, food, fuel, and electricity. Fuel shortages forcing the closure of hospitals and bakeries. People forced into shelters in increasingly dire conditions. Overcrowded, with poor sanitation and unsafe drinking water, bringing forward the specter of disease outbreak. A humanitarian catastrophe unfolds for the 2.2 million people locked inside Gaza who are being collectively punished.
Tel Aviv has vowed to continue the assault, despite widespread protests and international calls for a ceasefire. Benjamin Netanyahu has vowed to continue with the offensive.
Now, in its stated objective, Israel claims that it wants to destroy Hamas in the Gaza Strip. For so long as Hamas continues to exist in Gaza as Palestinian enclave's governing authority, Israel claims there can be no possibility of peace.
But what really is Hamas? How did Hamas emerge? What are its objectives? Our next report gets you more details.
Hamas, which in Arabic means zeal, stands for the Islamic Resistance Movement. It politically controls the Gaza Strip, a territory of about 365 square kilometers, home to 2.3 million people. Since 2007, Hamas has been in power in the Gaza Strip, which is blockaded by Israel. The Hamas movement was founded in 1987 in Gaza by a wheelchair-bound imam, Sheikh Ahmed Yassin, and his aide, Abdulaziz al-Rantisi. Shortly after the start of the first Intifada, or uprising against the Israeli occupation of the Palestinian territories. It originally started as an offshoot of the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt and led to the creation of a military wing, the Izz al-Din al-Qassam Brigades, to pursue an armed struggle against Israel. Its stated objective is liberation of historic Palestine. Beside the armed struggle, it also offers social welfare programs to the Palestinian victims of the Israeli occupation. Unlike the Palestine Liberation Organization, or PLO, Hamas doesn't recognize Israel's statehood. It also vehemently opposes the Oslo peace accords negotiated by Israel and the PLO in the mid-1990s. Hamas staunchly opposes US policies in the Middle East. Along with Islamic Jihad, which is the second largest armed group in the region, Hamas coordinates military activity among the various armed groups in Gaza. What triggered the audacious and unprecedented Saturday attacks? The surprise incursion was in response to the 16-year blockade of Gaza and repeated Israeli raids inside the West Bank cities in the past year. The violence at Al-Aqsa, the increasing attacks by illegal Jewish settlers on Palestinians, and the mushrooming of illegal Jewish settlements on Palestinian lands. Though they have been accused of attacking civilians, Hamas claims to have attacked only legitimate military targets. It is also alleged that for years, various governments led by Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu advocated an approach that divided power between the Gaza Strip and the West Bank, thereby cutting Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas down to size. But the flawed approach also ended propping up Hamas. The flawed policy of Netanyahu bolstered Hamas and ultimately resulted in the bloodiest day in the history of Israel.
Now, a glaring consequence of the Israel-Gaza war is the manner in which one of the world's busiest shipping lanes has been impacted.
Yemen's strategic position means that the Houthis have technically shut down the bab-el-Mandeb choke point in the Red Sea for any ship that is suspected of trading with Israel.
Now, the Houthis say that they are only targeting those ships that are linked to Israel in solidarity with the Palestinian people in Gaza.
But the fear the Israel-Gaza war could spread into a much larger area in West Asia is very real. Hezbollah too has made some menacing noises since the 7th of October, but has by and large remained out of a full-blown conflict.
But what no one can deny at this moment is that West Asia has been turned into a bit of a powder keg because of the Israel-Hamas war, and no one can really predict as to what could happen from here on. Israel's border with Lebanon is a de facto war zone. It is still a low-intensity conflict. Artillery and rocket fire has been steadily exchanged since the 7th of October. In strident rhetoric, both Israel and Hezbollah have threatened a bigger escalation. Hezbollah, that is backed by Iran, claims that it is turning on the temperature in northern Israel in solidarity with the Palestinians in Gaza.
Hezbollah and the resistance in Lebanon are making great sacrifices in support of Gaza and the future of this country. We are making the sacrifices that a battle requires, and they are great. But we are also repelling a great danger. We are ready for more whenever necessary. We are not intimidated by threats or warnings. We in the field are clear that we are part of this battle.
ولكننا نصد خطرا كبيرا أيضا.
I also suggest to our enemies that they pay attention to the spirit, because if Hezbollah chooses to start an all-out war, then it will single-handedly turn Beirut and South Lebanon, not far from here, into Gaza and Khan Yunis. We are determined to bring victory, and we will do it with your help.
But the Israel-Lebanon border is not the only thing that has come alive. Container shipping through the Red Sea corridor is in a limbo. The ripples from the apocalyptic war in the Gaza Strip are now being felt in the Red Sea. In incident after incident, Houthi rebels are now targeting cargo ships that are being used for trade with Israel. The Houthis say their logic is clear. So long as Israel continues with its bombardment of the Gaza Strip and continues to enforce its crippling siege, which has resulted in a humanitarian catastrophe, the Houthis, who control the strategic choke point of bab-el-Mandeb, will target container ships headed for Israel, irrespective of the flag they fly. The trouble began on the 19th of November, when the world woke up to this bizarre video of a cargo ship getting hijacked on the high seas. The video shows armed men in fatigues rappelling down a helicopter and taking over the crew of the cargo ship and altering its course towards the port city of Hodeida. The 189-meter-long cargo ship called Galaxy Leader was operated by a Japanese crew and was carrying a Bahamas flag. Initially, Israel even tried to distance itself from the ship, but it soon emerged that the ship was linked to the Israeli billionaire Abraham Rami Ungar.
The Yemeni armed forces reiterate their warning to all ships affiliated with the Israeli enemy or those dealing with it that they will become legitimate targets for the armed forces, and urge all countries whose nationals operate in the Red Sea to refrain from any work or activity with Israeli ships or ships owned by Israelis.
The strategic location of Yemen at the bab-el-Mandeb choke point means that the biggest escalation of the Gaza war outside of the Palestinian territories is happening at bab-el-Mandeb. Bab-el-Mandeb means the gate of grief. It is a choke point that is just 20 kilometers wide between the Yemeni island of WION to the coast of Djibouti and Eritrea. An estimated 18,000 ships pass through this stretch every year, which means an average of 50 ships pass through these waters every single day. Approximately 40% of all global trade must make its way through this narrow choke point, which the Houthis can disrupt in case of an escalation. Since the capture of the Galaxy Leader, the Houthis have struck several other ships. On the 13th of December, a Marshall Islands flagged container ship called Ardmore Encounter was targeted with a drone near Bab-el-Mandeb. Again on the 13th of December, a Norwegian commercial tanker Strinder was struck with a missile as it was suspected of carrying crude oil to an Israeli terminal. On the 14th of December, Maersk Gibraltar came under attack. On the 15th of December, two Liberian flagged ships, the MSC Palatian III and the MSC Elania, were attacked by missiles, while another ship called the Al Jasra also came under a missile attack by the Houthis. The repeated Houthi attacks on ships suspected of trading with Israel has resulted in several shipping companies suspending their operations through the Red Sea, including the likes of Maersk and the German shipping firm Hapag-Lloyd.
We now have information that there has been an attack on a Hapag-Lloyd ship. The German government strongly condemns all attacks on ships, including, of course, the attack on the Hapag-Lloyd ship. The Houthi attacks on civilian merchant ships in the Red Sea must stop immediately. But they also emphasize that the security threat to Israel comes not only from Hamas in Gaza, but also from the Houthis.
The United States, which maintains several military bases in the region, has dubbed the Houthi involvement as destabilizing for the region and has now put in place a maritime task force to secure the Red Sea corridor.
We've demonstrated in the past is that our military will not hesitate to take action where we deem it necessary and appropriate, including to protect against actions in the maritime domain that could threaten our forces.
To protect its shipping supply lines, Israel has deployed its new SAR-6 corvettes in the Red Sea. Besides cargo ships, the Houthi missiles have also targeted Eilat at the southern tip of Israel. And the SAR-6 corvettes have been deployed off Eilat for their anti-air capabilities. Insurance costs for large cargo ships passing through the Red Sea corridor have already gone up by tens of thousands of dollars. So if the war in the Gaza Strip continues and more container shipping firms suspend their operations through the Red Sea, then the supply chains linking Asia and Europe will falter, sparking shortages and eye-watering inflation globally.
A child is a child. Children everywhere must be protected at all times and must never come under attack. This is a statement issued by the UNICEF, an agency of the United Nations working in over 190 countries, saving children's lives, defending their rights and helping them fulfill their potential. On the 7th of October, when hundreds of Hamas militants infiltrated into southern Israel and carried out a horrific carnage, the most disturbing detail that emerged was of children and elderly being killed and taken hostage. The world sympathized with the plight of the Israeli kids, condemned Hamas's heinous crime and demanded justice and stood in solidarity with Israel. Israel retaliated with daily bombings, which snuffed out entire families, children included. A little over 11 weeks into the Israel-Palestine conflict, and the Gaza Strip has borne witness to a devastating toll on its children caused by these indiscriminate Israeli bombings. One shudders to even imagine the total casualties of war, not to mention the profound changes these impressionable minds would have gone through. The trauma, shock, and sheer horror of what the children have been exposed to will without a doubt alter their lives forever.
20th of November is celebrated annually as World's Children's Day. A global initiative, the day is used to promote children's rights, safety, education, health, and happiness. This year, it came amid the raging Israel-Palestine conflict. According to UNICEF, children make up 47% of Gaza's 2.3 million population. Since the 7th of October, reportedly, at least 8,663 children have been killed in daily Israeli bombings. That is, one Palestinian child is killed every 10 minutes. Or 1 out of every 200 children in the Gaza Strip has been killed. Heart-wrenching stories such as that of 33-year-old Fida has tragically been a constant ever since the bombings began.
They destroyed an entire neighborhood and no less than 50 martyrs were recovered from the rubble. I walked over 50 bodies looking for my son. My son, whom I was happy to see grow by every centimeter, they robbed him from me. I was looking for body parts for my son. In the end, my other younger son told me, "Mom, here's Uday." I could only identify him by his belt. He was wearing all black. I couldn't identify him at first because of the fire and the dust.
Hundreds of children are missing under the rubble, most of them presumed dead. A further 18,000 children have been injured, many of them with life-changing consequences. One shudders to imagine the trauma of multiple wars they have lived through. A month into the war, on the 6th of November, the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres likened the bombarded Gaza Strip to a graveyard for children and urged for an immediate ceasefire.
Gaza is becoming a graveyard for children. Hundreds of girls and boys are reportedly being killed or injured every day. The way forward is clear. A humanitarian ceasefire now. All parties respecting all their obligations under international humanitarian law now. This means the unconditional release of the hostages in Gaza now. Nothing can justify the deliberate torture, killing, injuring, and kidnapping of civilians. The protection of civilians must be paramount. I'm deeply concerned about clear violations of international humanitarian law that we are witnessing. Let me be clear. No party to an armed conflict is above international humanitarian law.
Apart from the daily attacks, Israel's total blockade on Gaza meant no food or water could enter Gaza territory. Gazans, especially children, found themselves at risk of dehydration and malnourishment, even though they were prioritized by their families for whatever little supplies available to them. For those lucky enough to survive these indiscriminate attacks, learning to survive without their family members could be a lifelong struggle. Reportedly, many more children have been killed in Gaza every day compared with Ukraine, Afghanistan, Iraq, and other conflict zones. Not that any reminder is needed, but a child, whether an Israeli or Palestinian, is a child and must be protected.
Now, war is old men scheming and young men dying. Or as the British mathematician, philosopher and playwright Bertrand Russell said, war does not decide who's right, it only decides who's left.
And as 2023 ends and 2024 begins, we can only hope that this new year will bring in some much needed peace to the world. Wishing you all a happy new year. Thanks for watching.